I call again for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza, the return of the sausages, the hostages.
Wow. What a year.
Base video.
Yeah, John, I can't believe all of that happened this year.
Oh man, I forgot about Maduro challenging Elon Musk to a fight. Elon Musk. That was one of my favorite
He
moments.
called him a donkey at one point.
He called him a bunch of names. We gotta go back and look at the transcript there. But crazy year all the way around. Nick, what do you think?
Yeah, this has been a crazy but also very depressing year, because this is a year where we've seen Israel spin on their Greater Israel Project using the most violent means possible. So it's been very hard to reflect on this year positively, but there have been some funny moments and some good moments at the same time. The fact that us four together and we all have booming audiences is one of the good news of the times, because one of the stories that I found most amusing is how liberal media completely crashed after all their credibility had been ruined after Donald Trump won. They pretend that Donald Trump was the biggest fascist that we ever see in our country. They said it will be the end of our democracy. And Sarah, Garland, John, isn't it funny they said it will be the end of our democracy? And now they're talking about Democrats' plans for 2028. So these lies, these lies is why, and we are seeing loss of credibility on conservative media as well. But among liberal media, it's in the toilet now, because even among people who are more shit-libby, who believed Rachel Maddow and MSNBC, even they started to question, like, man, I thought Donald Trump was done. I thought Donald Trump was going to get arrested. So I pass it back to the panel, but I think that's my number one favorite story in a year of depressing stories, is the complete fall of liberal mainstream media and how many liberal journalists have been laid off. The only time you ever see me celebrating anyone getting laid off, corporate media being laid off.
What about you, Garland? Do you agree? Now that Nick's bringing it up, I didn't even think about it prior, but that might be the biggest story of 2024, is the kind of death of our mainstream media as we know, or legacy news, as they're starting to refer to it as.
You know, I think in the context of what we're doing here today, that is probably the story that we should start with, you know, because here we are, a couple of things. Here we are on alternative media. And might I add, I'm running this on my channel. Right now, I sent it over to Jamal Thomas. He's running it on his channel. So this thing is being run on multiple channels. So it's not just the death of the, you know, whatever you want to call this crap, the liberal propaganda networks, but it is that new media is growing, that alternative media is rising. You know, I got a friend of mine's got a boat mechanic shop that I go, yeah, I love boats. I go hang out with him and, you know, talk about boats and stuff. But the guy that owns it, his son works there now, and the guy's like 34. And when I went over to talk, he's like, oh yeah, I'm familiar with your YouTube channel. He's like, I don't even watch mainstream news. I only watch YouTube. I ran into you. I'm like, hey, I know that guy. It's Garland, my dad's friend. And I like get on the train. I was in New York. And some guy walks up to me and says, aren't you Garland Nixon? I said, yeah. He goes, I watch you. And then he starts talking about all of the different channels that he watches. And so it's the death of the propaganda, government propaganda networks masquerading as media. But at the same time, there's a rise of an alternative media that is organic. We're not doing anything fake and phony. We're just people, regular people, saying what we think, what we believe. Some of us are maybe highly educated. Some of us barely got a high school degree. Some of us, you know, doctors or lawyers. Other of us are looking for a job, out of work, whatever. We're all regular people. And I think the growth of normal people having a normal conversation, we're calling it media, but maybe it's something else. I think it's awesome. I'm all for it. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think it's the golden age of journalism right now. We was in a dark age during my teenage years. Like, for the longest time, thinking about it, the only way you can have a voice in American news for decades before the new era of journalism was if you went to Harvard, some journalism school, you allied to the rich, you are part of the bourgeoisie journalist system. Like, the ordinary people, they didn't have a voice for decades. So there was like a dark period in journalism Now we're in the golden age of journalism, and I know that the West is going after it. The UK essentially has no free speech, but that's the sign of the golden age, because the United States and the West and the establishment is cracking down on journalism because of the golden age we're living in. I'm a college dropout, and I'm talking to people from all over the world. I'm talking to journalists from China. I'm talking to people in Moscow. I'm talking to people who report out on Germany. I was talking to an Iranian reporter. I was talking to Syrian analysis. I was talking to Venezuelan analysis. People from Brazil who like. When have an uneducated Black kid from the Midwest ever been in a situation where I can talk to people all over the world and get American propaganda shattered, which I have. So even if not everyone's gonna be like a Savvy Savage, you know what I mean? I would be a Garland Nixon, a Jimmy Dore, but I highly implore that people engage in citizen journalism, because this has been an amazing experience for me, even though I don't have a giant channel, because I'm talking to people all over the world. I'm talking to Garland Nixon, Sarah, John here, and it's a great experiment for not just the working class, but anyone who want to see the current ruling class overthrown. And they relied on us being isolated from each other. And we're in the era, at least until they strip it away, because I think it's coming. Like, I think the United States quickly want to become the UK and Germany, where free speech is gone. But while we have it, we got to enjoy it. I think it's a great time. And anyone should. Go ahead.
Let me add something else. What's interesting is, if you look at the state of the media, the CNN, MSNBCs, the state of the Democratic Party, they're in exactly the same state, right? and the analogy that I give is this. Here's what the media and all looks like to me. It's like there's a famous picture of Mike Tyson when he got kind of screwed up in the head and finally lost to Buster Douglas of all people, right? And the picture is he got hit, wham, excuse me. He's laying on the floor, disoriented, and his mouthpiece, it came out, and he's trying to find his mouthpiece, right? And basically, the representation is he's been hit in the head, and he's completely disoriented, and he doesn't know what to do next, right? That's the Democratic Party. That's the media. They're laying on the mat, reaching for their mouthpiece. We'll go have dinner with Trump. And Morning Joe goes to have dinner with Trump. Well, what happens? Their loyal followers go bananas on him. Oh crap, that's not going to work. We'll change this up. So they're trying everything they can. They have no clue what to do to come back, because it's the very mindset that they have. When you hear excuses, perfect example, you hear excuses from the Democratic Party, the Democrats. Why did they lose? Well, the Black voters voted for Trump because they're a bunch of misogynist racists and they can't stand, a woman, right? Oh, so it's their fault. Well, what about the Latinos? Chuck Fraud the other day said, well, the thing about the Latinos, they come from countries with dictators and authoritarian rulers, so they're fine with dictators and author. In other words, their minds are, for dictators and authoritarian. It's everybody's fault. They will not say, perhaps we lost because of the way we governed for the last 5 years. The one thing they can't talk about is the way they governed for the last 4 years. Oh, no, it's the fault of everybody. But the media and the Democrats and that whole sphere, they have no clue what to do. And if they knew, they couldn't admit it.
There's a couple of stories that really accentuate that for me. It's spot on. One is obviously the 2024 elections, and just heading up to the election, the denial of the mainstream media to admit that Joe Biden was senile, mentally unfit to actually hold the office of the presidency. All of a sudden they do a 180 and say, oh, we're going to have Kamala Harris in now because, are you guys crazy? Like, clearly Joe Biden is senile. And so the denial of the president's condition was such an obvious way that stations like MSNBC, CNN were just clearly denying the reality that was in front of everybody's faces. And then the second one is Israel. I think that the war on Palestine and the contradictions there, not being able to piece it together for the American people, while you're having some of the liberal media feign this sympathy toward the genocide that's unfolding on the Palestinians, you're also still having them justify like the U.S.'s bombing raids on Yemen. And then not to mention this other just more blanket denial of reality, which is the economic conditions of the American workers. It's like they're telling us over and over again as we head up to the 2024 elections that the economy is better. They're, using all of these statistics to try to convince us that somehow the economy is in good shape. When it's in front of everybody's eyes, we see the prices at the grocery store. We see the homelessness on the streets. We see all of the mental anguish and drug addiction that's afflicting the young people in this country in particular. And so just that like general denial of reality and how insulting the mainstream media has been to the intelligence of the average person. I think that those few things are really what stand out to me.
Like the Democrat Party can't be failed. They can't fail. You only can fail the Democrat Party. They will never accept responsibility for where they at right now. And I see a segment, to your point, John, where they were saying, well, the economy was so great, it's just Americans didn't feel it. What do you think the economy means? Like, I'm very confused with these metrics they use, because I've seen all these metrics showing a boom in homelessness. I'm seeing these metrics are showing a boom of Americans who are suffering from medical debt, including people in my family. I used to sell cars. I saw the number, because I still watch the market all the time. I can't help myself. I saw a number where there's a record. It's like a far away record amount of people who are upside down on their car loan. Like, it's just small indicators like that show that this fantasy of GDP and Wall Street being an indicator of the economy is completely fiction. And I'm glad people are starting to wake up and starting to acknowledge that the metrics that we use is completely garbage. Another metric that I'd like to point out to liberals who are confused about why people are upset about the economy. Ignore all the like hardcore number metrics I just threw at you. How do people feel about the future? How optimistic they are about the future? In America, they feel there is no chance the government will ever address their problems. When you ask Americans how they feel about the optimism about the future, it's nil. It's non-existent. That's why you always get all these doomsday cults and all these doomsday preppers in the United States. It's only 2012, Y2J. It's always something, because people are just naturally pessimistic. Now compare that to China. And I got a lot of the chuds angry on Twitter because I had the audacity to praise China and Xi Jinping, which I would never apologize for, because the difference is astounding. Xi Jinping, on his New Year's speech they usually give, I watched it and I was blown away, because it was just him talking about infrastructure projects, feeding families, how we're going to house more families, how we're going to increase the quality of life for the Chinese citizen. Compare that to what you hear from Trump, what you hear from Biden. It's nothing but culture wars. It's nothing but culture wars. Who are we going to bomb? Who are we going to invade? Who are we going to fight? Oh, the radical left. Oh, the radical right. Hate your neighbor. You got the difference between the Chinese model and the American model is astounding, which shows why Chinese people, they have an optimistic view of the future. They live in like the Jetsons. We're the we're Flintstones, and people don't realize it.
Well, you talked about what do we think about this sort of revolution, the second tech bro revolution that we're going on? Because you're talking about the future. The future that I'm seeing now is pretty bleak as I watch this sort of bourgeois, fascist tech bro takeover that's kind of started with the H-1B. We're calling it the MAGA Civil War, and this sort of I keep on saying it. I'll say it again. That textbook definition of fascism as Elon makes his moves to take over our government.
Well, let me say a comment real quick on what Nick was saying, and that is, in a broad sense, here's the way I would put it: the gaslighting's not working anymore, and they don't know what else to do, because everybody's like, "Hey, man, I can't afford to live." Oh, well, all you need to do is go to this website. We got pie charts there. We got graphs, and that'll show you that everything's wonderful. Ignore your maxed out credit cards. Ignore the fact that there's a sheriff outside about to serve a summons to throw you out of your house. That stuff's not important. Go to this website, and you'll know that all is well. Oh, by the way, you go to our other website, it'll tell you that the Russians are fighting with shovels, and they ran out of missiles 3 months into the war. All this crap of lies, right? And their cult, like the people who are diehard Democrats in the cult still believe that stuff, but the rest of the world's like, Yeah, I think we're going to go in another direction here. And they don't know what to do. And even that's why, even now, why'd you lose? When people like us listen, I don't care what it is, we listen to members of the Democratic Party say why they lost. We just shake our heads and we say, you can't be fixed. Because, there's problems. So I used to teach problem solving models, and they start with like, you use the acronym DEFINE. It starts with, every problem model starts with some form of define the problem. Before you can address any problem, you have to define, you have to understand the problem, and then you can start all kinds of other things, right? Evaluating alternatives and blah, 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 right? But my point being, to watch these people, the whole liberal sphere as it is, that the things that they did seem preposterous to us. I mean, you got to add this, and this is part of what he said. We could look at Joe Biden and like when they were telling us, hey, Joe Biden, this is the best Joe Biden ever. For the last 4 years, we've been saying this guy's out of his mind, right? Then they bring Kamala Harris, and then they act like they're shocked. They put him up to a debate, and they're like, oh, this is shocking and amazing. I can't believe this guy's having some mental problems. Who could have possibly saw that coming? And everybody in alternative media has been screaming at the top of their lungs since before he got elected in 2020 that the guy's done. Then they bring on Kamala Harris. I literally had people say to me, diehard Democrats, yes, she's highly educated, she's smart, she's brilliant. And I'd listen to her babbling and cackling. It was mind-numbing to listen to this woman. And I'm like, how did she get through law school? She's the stupidest person I've heard. She can't answer a single sentence. I want you guys to tell me if I'm wrong. The only question I ever heard her answer the whole time is when they said, will you do anything different than Joe Biden? And she said, I can't think of anything. That was an answer. Not a good one, but it was an answer. The rest of the time, it was Americans have aspirations and the significance of the future of these aspirations in that way. And we're like, what the hell? So the gaslighting that Joe Biden, he's smart, Kamala Harris is smart. Ooh, we've got a new poll in Iowa that says Trump is down by 120 points and there's only 100 points to go. And now people are just like, I'm sorry, you lied to us. You gaslit us over and over and over. And even a lot of the Democrats are pissed because I knew people that literally, they're like, oh no, that Trump has no chance. This is over. It's going to be a blowout. And they had them convinced of that. And after it was over, they're like, what happened? So, hey, I really think that what we're talking about here, part of what we're talking about is a collapse of entire institutions. The liberal institutions have collapsed, at least in the mind of the working class and the masses who used to have some respect. It used to be this person went to Harvard and Yale. Oh, wow, Harvard and Yale, they must be smart. Now we're like, well, that's the last person I want to listen to.
Yeah, right. Please put them away from me.
Yeah, look what they've done. Look how it worked out, being everything run by the Harvard and Yale graduates.
Yeah, well, Garland, let me explain something to you, all right, about the special military operation. Basically, Russia is a big country, and they invaded Ukraine, a smaller country. And basically, that's bad, all right?
Oh.
That's what Kamala Harris, that's her brilliant analysis of the special military operation, what's happening in Ukraine. But to your point, when I think about 2024 and look back on the year, I think that it actually symbolizes the death of an entire era. And I look back to 2014 through 2024 as this kind of particular era where the United States shifted its geopolitical strategy, away from the war on terror and towards great power conflict. We look at the Maidan coup as being one of the flashpoints there that kind of symbolized that shift and that turn. But that also dovetailed with a very kind of particular strain of politics on the so-called left, this kind of particular identity that Americans had when it came to how they identified what left politics means in the United States. 2014 to 2024, I believe this was kind of the era of identity politics and culture wars really being brought to the fore. And Sarah, to go to your question, asking about what we expect from these tech bros, I just want to point out how instrumental social media and big tech was in juicing these culture war identity politics narratives, especially in this era. It's like they built up a straw man that now people like Elon Musk are pretending to be, our white knights, saviors coming to tear down this wokeness. And what I think is that we're in a fundamentally, materially new phase of opportunity for the left, because I think, to your point, this identity politics, liberalism that is associated in the minds of many Americans with being the left has been utterly defeated. And so I think this opens up a whole new opportunity for us to build a populist movement. But what I also expect in this new era is that there will continue to be efforts to divert populist forces one way or another. And we're already seeing this today with Elon, the H-1B discussion, right? Of course, there's very legitimate critiques of H-1B, and we've made a number of them. We're seeing a number of them online, but they're also riddled with and colored by this, racism, in particular towards Indians, that a lot of people on the right wing are promoting. And these are the posts that are often getting boosted, right? Just this crazy talk about why Indians are so bad without any material analysis of actually how this is impacting the American working class. So I expect in this new Trump administration for these kind of right-wing populists, for the big tech monopolies to try to divert that populist sentiment towards more racism, more identity politics. And I expect that to be one of the defining features of this new administration.
Yeah, there's going to be a lot of Trump loyalists, people who made their channel and their Twitter profiles off of Donald Trump. They have two choices: continue the grift or get real. Because I talked about the liberal corporate media, but I think we talked about this with Sarah before, where there's actually a new mainstream media among Twitter and X, where people are benefited and rewarded for bootlicking Donald Trump. Like if you post a picture of Donald Trump at assassination, like this is a true hero, Elon gonna boost that shit to get 50,000 likes. You think people haven't realized that? So there's this very clear and apparent media complex that is built around stroking Donald Trump and MAGA ego. These are like people like Tucker Carlson. They fall into this as well because they will have good critiques on some things, but they had to polish Trump's turd at the end. So that's the new mainstream media, because we just talked about how MSNBC is irrelevant, and they are. NPR is irrelevant. The people I'm talking about is highly relevant. The people who are misleading workers into thinking that Trump has their side, even though he doesn't. The Ben Shapiro wing of MAGA is the most influential and dominant. There's no anti-establishment wing of MAGA. There's Ben Shapiro and there's Elon Musk. And there are a lot of Donald Trump supporters who are like, oh my God, I can't believe Donald Trump sided with Elon Musk over my poor white ass. What do you think is going to happen? And now there's going to be a lot of people who go through this reality. The problem is we got to go through this new mainstream media, the popular mainstream media, the Tim Pool types, who will continue to gaslight these people, even though Donald Trump is outright betraying them, and he's doing it even before he take office, just based on who he's picking, based on his backtracking. And that's something that we will have to continue to fight in this new era, is because obviously MAGA has a giant political capital right now. And if you are someone who's just looking for a career, looking for money, especially since Elon paying out, it's very easy just to do propaganda for that side. So that's something that we got to confront as well.
I want to go just through a couple of super chats here. So thank you so much, Cletus, for the donation. We also have Klaus. Thank you so much. Yeah. And then a question from John Freese, which I think is a good one. Any thoughts on how the populist left in America can build a united front? So sorry, Garland, definitely go ahead, but I'm interested to kind of run this question by the two of you.
Well, what you're doing is important. I'll tell you why too, because what we're seeing is people who in alternative media, what you did was just important, because if you notice something, all of us who run it, look in the chat. People in the chat are having conversations. People in the chat are making jokes, talking about sometimes stuff that we ain't even talking about. And all of us, every now and then, you glance over, you can't help it. You look at the chat and you see somebody say something, you're like, oh, that makes sense. And then you comment on it, right? And so that's what you just did was important, because if you're watching Fox or MSNBC, you're not part of that conversation. And I think one of the things that people like is they're part of the conversation. You just looked at that and said, let's talk about what this person, that ain't happening with the mainstream media. So I think what you did is important, and it's a part of what I was going to get into and what that person was saying. And that is this whole business about a united front. Look, one of the things I'm happy to see people in MAGA fighting back and pushing back against something that's said by Elon Musk or whoever for this reason. Oftentimes what I think oftentimes is we're looking at a lot of battles between various factions of the ruling elite, right? And now the tech bro libertarian faction, you know, of the Musks and the Teals and this Ramaswamis, that's a faction of the ruling elite, new money, etc., right? So they're like, well, we got it now. Before it was the whoever, maybe military industrial complex, maybe Wall Street, or the people who do mining and oil. Okay, those are factions of the ruling elite. So now the tech bro libertarians are like, we got the steering wheel now. We're in charge, right? What I'm glad is that somebody in MAGA, whether I agree with it or not, pushed back and said, no, we don't agree with you. We'll fight. Yeah. It was because what the liberal media wants to say, and I keep using this word liberal media, people always think you're on the right. I'm to the left of all of them. But what they want to say is the whole MAGA movement and all is just like the Democratic Party. They're just a bunch of mindless zombies. And if Trump says jump and Musk says jump, they'll jump, and anything he tells them. Well, what we're seeing, and I think it's positive, is that because a lot of them are simply working class people who are fed up too, which provides an opportunity for that kind of united front that our brother in the chat was just talking about. They get pissed if they don't get what they want. So even in, you know, people thought, well, Trump has it made now. For 4 years, he can do anything he wants. Well, you know what? There's a lot of people in MAGA who are hurting economically, and they voted. I know people who've been Democrats their whole life who voted for Trump, Black folks. And why? Because they're like, man, everything's too high. Basic, any port in a storm. I'll try anything to you know. Well, a lot of those people, they ain't just going to do anything that they're told. And as soon as one of the so-called leaders, Elon Musk or Ramaswamy, steps in a direction they don't like, they're going to start throwing punches at him. Good. The working class people, I don't care who they support, whether I like them or not, working class people out here, if the people that are supposedly in charge start doing things they don't want or going back against their word or whatever, they need to start throwing blows. And I mean, I'm not saying the whole, you know, I'm not saying Luigi style, because I'm opposed to violence, which is another huge story, I might add. But you get my point. Another story, Luigi is a major story.
Yeah. Well, maybe let's talk about that, because I think that that was really symbolic of another instance where the mainstream media is very disconnected from the feelings and sentiments of the working people. And you saw this tremendous and historical outpouring for Luigi. And, you know, I agree with you, Garland. You know, I think tactically it's not something I support, but I also understand and sympathize with all of the millions of people who have to struggle through the brutality and criminality of our healthcare system and healthcare insurance companies in particular. And to see all the people kind of rally behind him and make a figure out of him as kind of a heroic figure against the establishment says a lot about, I think, where the American people are in general. And it's wasn't just the leftists. There's a lot of people on the right too. If you looked at Fox News and their coverage and YouTube in the comments, there were many people saying, well, actually the healthcare industry is very corrupt and criminal and all of this stuff. So yeah, Nick, what do you think about that? Because I know that you spoke quite a bit about it.
Yeah, I've been having fun with this story on hotspot. I did like 4 hotspots on this topic alone. I am a believer that the state should never have a monopoly on violence, and I'm not going to be I'm not the person who pull a trigger on someone. I will to defend myself in a quickness, defend myself. That's not my modus operandi. I don't even like guns generally, and I don't believe in disarming the proletariat. I'm a martial artist, so I'm not the violent one. But the state should never have a monopoly on violence, and there's nothing wrong with hating your oppressors. Hating your oppressors is self-love. Hating the evil ruling class is self-love. So Brian Thompson was a murderer. He was a mass murderer. And if you don't believe he is, you're doing nothing but devaluing our lives. Mm-hmm. Oh, it's okay to kill people off via paperwork. And you have the ruling class in America, and you have many people, they're very confused about how Americans are cheering this on. Let's think about this for a second. We live in the most violent empire in modern human history that cheers on genocide. We cheer on famine. We put on sanctions. We sanction 1/3 of the world population with the goal of starving people. There are people who see the corpse of Palestinian children and then they think that's dandy. They see George Floyd kneeled on by a police officer and they celebrate that. They see people get snuffed down the streets. They 100% okay with it. And the ruling class, they look at us and they wonder why we violent. We got a giant police state that is killing record amount of Americans. We have a ruling class that can't solve a damn problem without violence. So a ruling class who can't solve any problem without violence is surprised that their populace is turning to violence to solve their problems. And this is after trying to do it non-peacefully for a long time. So I praise Luigi, because how many times have people went through the system and shit didn't work? And then Luigi did what he did, and all of a sudden people in health insurance companies are talking about we need reforms. Really wasn't talking about reform. You guys didn't listen. So people can be shocked. I study history. The sword and the gun is the most effective way to change things in human history. This idea of pacifism being a way to change shit is ahistorical. Show me where that works historically. So as someone who wants to see things change, I want something to be done that is effective. I'm not saying vigilante violence is effective, but we need to stop taking it off the table altogether. Like the ruling class. Go ahead, Sarah. I don't want to get in trouble.
No, you're fine. Look at the conversation that it sparked. I mean, the comment sections were all my story about health insurance, my story about health insurance, my story about losing my house because of cancer, my story about health insurance. And sucks that the guy died. I won't shed a tear, but exactly. Like sometimes I'm not. I'm with Nick. I'm not I'm not afraid of violence or the use of violence to, I don't want to say to get what you want, but to further the revolutionary cause. Like that's just, you have to be willing to go to those lengths, and you can't be ashamed when you say, okay, Luigi may have done a good thing, and then you can't back down from that, but you have to be able to explain why it was a good thing. I mean, I have a mother that was paralyzed by an operation, and she was kicked out of rehabilitation after like a month and a half because her insurance was like, that's it. Like she was paralyzed on half her body. So no, I'm not going to shed a tear for a health insurance mogul. And I hope this or health insurance CEO, and I hope that this probably won't, but maybe in other industry CEOs will be like, we're next, because that's the idea that we want to convey, is that you're next.
I had a viral tweet where I explained, because I said earlier, I can't emphasize this enough, especially after that rant, I'm probably not the guy to do it. I'm not naturally violent. You know what I mean? I know how to fight. I pride myself on that, but I'm not a violent person. What I'm saying is that the most deranged, the most violent among us, how about stop gangbanging? How about stop shooting up schools and focus on the enemy? That's all I'm saying. Yes. I'm not saying I would do it. I'm not saying I'm endorsing it, but I want less school shootings. I want more Brian Thompson. That's the only thing I'm saying.
Today, I even got in a conversation with one of these, I won't mention his name because I don't want to, but whatever, one of the larger, one of the new mainstream, this new moneyed, weird crypto scammer / Twitter Roddy, I guess. I don't know what to call them. I call them the Twitter Roddy because they're like the Twitter conspiracy JQers. And I said, when are you going to, this is the first time I've ever gotten to speak to him. And I said, when are you going to stop focusing on the whites and start talking about the working class? And everybody was like, what? Like, this is some revolutionary thought. And I was like, we need less of these populist demagogues that are just screaming about the Jews, and more of this more of this working class solidarity. And so I'm just glad that kind of Luigi spurred that conversation along, and people like you really pick up torches like that and then just absolutely run with it, because that's the stuff that really needs to be highlighted.
Also, just so everybody know, I just checked. We're running on 3. We're running here. We're running on my channel, DDGeopolitics, and Jamal Thomas and Garland Nixon. And we just hit 500. We got 500 people watching right now between the 3 channels. So that's awesome. Here's the other thing I think that's
300 on RB, by the way, too.
We have
you run on RB. Wow.
4,000 total right now. 4,005 viewers total right now.
Wow.
It's going up. It's only going up.
Huge numbers.
So this thing that I didn't even know was this easy. So I just want to say this because Garland brought it up. I didn't even know this was possible. Garland emailed me and said, just hit me with the link. We could share it on. So let's put this out there. If we have more people that want to do stuff like this, I'm totally about it and putting it onto our channels. This is dope. Like it's really
it's awesome, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, you know, just to throw this out there, because I think this is going to be something that's going to be going big time in now going into the next year, because Scott Ritter did this "Say No to Nuclear War" thing, where he had this event where all these people were speaking against nuclear war, and we ran it on a bunch of channels, and man, it had like unbelievable number of views. Then people on Twitter, and they were tweeting it towards Elon Musk and Trump and everybody. And I think this is going to be something that happens with new media, where we all start saying, hey man, we got something good, everybody share it around. Let me say this about Luigi, and I think it's important. Something you got to connect to that. January 6th. Let me tell you why. A big part of the, for God knows only why, I guess because it's a cult, but when they're running, they're like, January 6th, Trump did this, look, and then they're like, and he came in, and they wanted to hang Mike Pence, and they wanted to do bad things to AOC, she was like blocks away. I mean, how are they going to transport over to get her? Whatever the hell, but she claimed she was there, but apparently she was up the street. But the bottom line was this: the message in what turned out to be the ruling elites a Pearl Harbor moment, for whatever reason, was the plebes, the working class. They don't know their place, and they came in here to do us harm. And they just thought the voters were going to be all over that and say, oh my God, we got to vote for Kamala Harris because of January 6th. And the voters were like, we don't give a damn about January 6th. And what we saw with Luigi was the voters were like, we kind of wish they had hung you. We're out here tying up the ropes ourselves. We're up here sharpening up the old whatchamacallits, what are the things the French used to cut?
Guillotine.
We're sharpening up the guillotines right now. So when you have to look at that and say, well, hell, no wonder January 6th didn't work for the working class. This country is one big January 6th, and the people are like, we're ready to revolt. And you think that you can argue to us that we're supposed to be horrified and offended because somebody was going to come in and potentially do harm to our oppressors? That dog ain't hunting no more. So to me, you got to connect that. The ruling elite have to now, maybe, they probably won't understand that they literally are in danger, that they pushed it so damn far. You can only push people, but so far. And when you push people to the point where they're scared of starving and their children are going to be on the street and all this horror, people will turn violent. And, that's where we are, I think. And I do think there's some that I think that's one of the things that have them stumbling around trying to figure out how to react to all these things that they believed. And now the reality on the ground has showed them that they were wrong about everything, and they are literally in physical danger. I mean, we got to be honest about that.
Yeah. Well, I think the last big existential threat that the ruling class saw, it's been a long time since they were really in this kind of jeopardy. I mean, I look back to like the 60s and 70s where there was the specter of the Soviet Union and communism kind of haunting the ruling class. But of course, that was a much different time, like materially speaking. Generally, things were getting better for, the mass of working Americans. And so, but even back then, I look at the strategies that they used to divide and conquer, to kind of carve up the left, carve up the true populist sentiments that might have been sympathetic to ideas about socialism or anything like that. And I see that coming down the pike again. These different tactics that they're going to use to kind of create these straw men and these forces that are almost channels for us to be able to have an outlet for all of this anger, but that are still kind of controllable. And so I think that what they're really scared of is a general class unity, right, among working people. And so to the extent that they can kind of carve us up and filter out our revolutionary energy by, elevating actions that don't necessarily further the revolutionary cause or the cause of just the working Americans in general, I think that's kind of what we're looking at. And again, I think that whether it's January 6th, whether it's these different racial animosities that are being elevated, especially now in social media, I really feel like that's going to be kind of the next tack. And what I think is really important to address one of the questions from our commenters about building, this populist left or kind of a working class movement is that we can't be so offended by one another because inevitably we're going to disagree. All of us have histories. All of our shit stinks, right? And that's just the reality. But we also have to remain focused on what binds us, what brings us together, and the material challenges that we all face in common, because more and more, all Americans are in this kind of common place where we're being oppressed by the banks. We're being oppressed by these large corporate, this corporatized big tech industry that I described on our stream the other day with Sarah as like a neo-feudalism, where we're basically like peasants tilling the field from Elon Musk's comments. and yeah, and they want to keep us segmented. And so I think that we need to fight against that with every possible tool in our arsenal.
Well, before we get to predictions for 2025, I do want to point out that we're talking about like a general awakening. And what I did notice, there were some clips in the recap, but there were a lot of protests and attempted color revolutions this year that just didn't really come to fruition, which is a sign that even people outside of NATO are starting to wake up. The Georgian attempted 3 color revolutions on Georgia this year, and none of them took. That's just one example. Serbia is another one that they kind of tried to turn a lithium mine protest into a color revolution or something of those, and it just didn't take hold. And these are good signs. It means people are becoming more informed and trusting the NGOs in their countries much less. So
the CIA is crying. Sorry, Sarah, but now the CIA is crying because now they're saying that the world is infested by Russian and China propaganda and misinformation, which is essentially them complaining that they no longer have the monopoly on information. No one believes them anymore. But go ahead, Sarah. I thought that was
no, you're exactly right. No more Voice of America. No more. What is the other one? Radio Liberty. No more. Like kids aren't listening to this. I talked to a Serbian. Mario was on our show on Sunday, and we talked about this a little bit. Their younger kids are much more in tune and able to be like, this smells like Soros. We're not really into this. It's really getting better, and that's like a really good sign, especially in the former Soviet Union and the Eastern European bloc. Like, this is really good. So I mean, 2025, I think it's going to be a hellish year. But I also think there's going to be a lot of stuff that gives us hope. So what do you guys think about 2025? We still have an ongoing genocide. We have an ongoing regional war that Israel is expanding. They're bombing Yemen right now. We have the SMO. Trump is coming into office with our new techno-feudalism and his like technological demagogues and Twitterati. Like, what do you guys think that 2024 has in store for us? I hate to ask a little bit.
Well, one of the things I think, look, I'm not 100% convinced that Trump's ever going to even get in office on January 20th. So we'll see. You know, he's pissed off some people. Maybe they'll look, you know, there's people that really don't want war ending and some other things Trump are saying, God forbid, look into anything they did regarding Russiagate or anything like that. So I'll believe Trump gets in power when he sees them. But what's going to be interesting is this weird contradiction of Trump coming in with these techno-feudalists, right? And at the same time arguing he's here for free speech, right? But, and because you look at like Twitter, yes, I'm the free speech guy, but there's some very serious free speech problems on Twitter, right? And not only that, the pushback against Trump, I think that the techno-feudalist will try to tamp that down. So there's going to be a weird contradiction that MAGA and the Trump people are going to have to deal with, and that is arguing that you're there for the working class and you're there for free speech and opening up everything, when the reality is they really can't afford to let people have that kind of conversation. So how to, you know, at least with the Democrats, you knew they were like, hey, we're just going to sanction it. We shut down everybody. You can't say anything if you're not allowed to say it. I don't like that, but I know where you're coming from. They didn't have a contradiction. They were all about censorship. You fight censorship. It's right in front of you. They're going to have to juggle in the Trump administration their arguments that they are the ones to save us from censorship. At the same time, they can't really afford to do that because as we can see, even with the H-1B argument, there are people in their movement that are going to push back against them for certain things. How do they deal with that?
Yeah.
I do want to address somebody in the chat that called me dumb so I can just further explain. This protest against lithium was not the color revolution. They tried to turn the working class protest against the lithium mine into a color revolution by liberalizing it. So I just want to explain that. Don't ever call me dumb in my chat ever again. I'm
And,
not.
and let me just throw something at you. And what people have to realize, that those who have mentioned color revolutions, is this: look, if they need to start one, they'll start a fake one. But oftentimes, if they see a real protest, they always try to go in and to take over that protest and utilize it for their own nefarious means. So to defend both you and the person who wrote that at the same time, number one, you shouldn't call people dumb. But number two, they're right in they got the right idea in a way, understanding that yes, this is an organic protest and these are organic protests. But what they didn't grasp, I think, was it don't matter if it's organic or not. When they either see a protest or create a protest, they're going to then try to take that and turn that into what they want. So yes, they're right. Yes, and you're right. Everybody's right. It's organic, but that don't stop them. But the other point being made here is that people are wise to that crap. It ain't working no more. It's over.
Yeah, and that's actually what they do all over the world. Most people will have a critique of the government, and then the United States will come in and blow it out of proportion. That's the same thing with the Iranian protests, and a lot of Western feminists get really upset with me when I talk about this. But I'm like, you guys need to stop falling for propaganda. For one, I've seen plenty of pictures of women in Iran that are not forced to wear headscarves and all that stuff. So the idea that they are as bad as the worst Muslim regimes is already false. But what they do, the CIA leftists, they will come in and they will amplify these giant protests. We're seeing in Hong Kong as well. It's a very established tactic that they use. Now, my prediction, and this also kind of ties into what Garland was talking about in terms of censorship, 2025, and mark my words now, question me now, quote me later. 2025 is going to go down as the biggest crackdown on free speech that we ever seen. We already seen Chuck Schumer propose an anti-Semitism, combating anti-Semitism bill in the Senate. Mike Johnson has one in the House, and Donald Trump already said he's 100% on board on that. So there's going to be this clash between the tech bros and MAGA, but guys, that's nothing compared to what's coming. Because people think, and this is what I mentioned earlier, people think that Candace Owens and the Tucker Carlsons have influence. They do not. The Ben Shapiro wing of MAGA is the side of MAGA that has the most influence. So we're going to see a crackdown of likes we've never seen before against people like Candace Owens, against people like Nick Fuentes, people on the right who question Zionism. And then obviously you will see the giant crackdown on the anti-genocide, anti-imperialist left. That will be cheered on by both parties. There will even be, because I don't think highly of these people, there are going to be a lot of MAGA people who are going to cheer on socialists being arrested because they're Jew haters. That's just how Americans been brainwashed into red blue. And because of this, we're going to see the biggest crackdown of all time in terms of fighting against anti-Semitism, which essentially means any criticism of Israel. So that's what we have looking forward to. And that's why it's shocking to me, because I ran countless segments talking about the anti-Semitism psyop, like the segments they have done. And if you don't watch corporate media, I do not blame you. But I do because of what I do. So they've been running these segments on CNN and MSNBC, pretending that people are Jew hunting. And because of that, they are going to have a hardcore fascist crackdown where students are going to be expelled. People are going to lose their job. You're talking about serious state crackdown. There's going to be schools that will have their funds pulled if they don't expel students for protesting against the state of Israel. And maybe the last thing I'll say, and I'll pass to you, Garland. I think you want to chime in.
No, go ahead.
You understand that many of these students, they're not even radical like me. No. They're not even fucking, I believe in a one-state solution. I don't believe the Zionists should be trusted with a state. I think that's the only correct solution because that's how we solve South African apartheid. Did we create two states in South Africa? No. So the only solution is to have one state, equal rights under the law. You guys understand that none of the students are even protesting for that. No. The students are protesting so their schools would divest from Israel.
And to add to that point, Nick, about the free speech crackdown, it is coming. The anti-Semitism is just one aspect, but it's also the anti-communism that we're seeing. We saw this anti-communist bill be proposed, and both the establishment and both major parties supported it overwhelmingly, and the only people who voted against it.
It's your fault that legislation is getting pushed through.
It is, but they're having to respond to it now. See, but it's funny because the only people opposed to it were just a few people on the MAGA right and then some people on the populist left. But so this entire kind of notion of any kind of populist politics taking root, whether it's rooted in solidarity with the Palestinian cause or whether it's communism and more Red Scare, that's all coming down the pike. And I think that with Trump, for my prediction, is that the ruling class is very skilled in how it uses some of the prevailing political trends and even populist sentiments for their favor. And one of the things that we saw Trump campaign on was immigration, right? This huge kind of focus on immigration, in particular from Latin America. And so I think that, if Trump does get in and we don't go to a full World War III but before the inauguration, what we're going to see is the ruling class kind of massage this in a way to divert some of the imperialist agenda and the imperialist focus toward Latin America. And we're already seeing them gear up for regime change in Venezuela, for regime change in Nicaragua. They're talking about the Panama Canal. Obviously, Cuba is still one of the pieces on the puzzle that the United States and their corporate elites haven't been able to quite subdue. So I really expect them to kind of use some of these right populist sentiments to further the agenda of the right of the establishment and the ruling class, just in a different sphere. They'll kind of pivot maybe a little bit away from Russia and focus on what they describe as their backyard. So that's what I see. That's what I see coming in the next year or so, to add on to what Nick described.
I'm going to go with one of our commenters and say that this year we will see some sort of soft or moderate invasion of Mexico in the style of Zionists versus Hezbollah. So it'll be like, we got to get these cartels cleared out, and we're going to do a nice little soft invasion of Mexico. They're getting ready for it. And also I wanted to touch on the best part about this whole shifting that Nick brought up with this, they're going to shift into fascism. It's not the fascism that all the demagogues on Twitter think it is. They're going to be out. That's not the National Socialist fascism. This is Zionism mixed with like corporate fascism. This is like, they don't realize that, like, they're like, we're bringing things to the forefront. You're Dan Bilzerians. It's like, no, you're next. You're out too. Once the inauguration happens, you're out. Like, I just don't understand why these people are too stupid. Maybe they just want the money now, and that's all they care about. I don't know.
Yeah,
but
regarding the free speech crackdown, another thing they're doing is they are watching people who are supportive of Luigi Maggioni and labeling them extremists. I am on probably every single government watch list that exists. So that's essentially what they're going to do. They're going to crack down on anyone who have a different interpretation on how to achieve change, to put it lightly. And they're going to crack down relentlessly. And what they're doing to Luigi is very chilling, because they're now labeling him as a terrorist, which means he could be charged by a military tribunal without a jury. So which means they're essentially saying that if you're a CEO, if you're a capitalist, you're a first-class citizen, and you will actually get way more in trouble for going after them. Instead of if there's any sort of random violence in the streets, just create a system of first and second-class citizens, and they're doing it right out in the open. Right. So essentially, if you go after a CEO, there's not going to be a jury. There's going to be a military tribunal because they're going to charge you as a terrorist.
I want people to think about what that means.
Another thing I'd like to add, and that is, here's the other part. And if you say, well, let's talk about Luigi and, examine that with any other context other than he's a terrible criminal, he did a terrible thing, you are supporting terrorism. So they call him a terrorist. That way, if you're on Twitter, whatever, Facebook, you name it, if they can now go after, utilize that, even more importantly than using terrorism against him, they can use that and call you a supporter of terrorism. They can now say you've got a organization that's nonprofit. We're going to revoke your nonprofit status because you're a supporter of terrorism, because you said, well, we got to talk about Luigi in a context other than criminality. Let's talk about supporting terrorism. So that's something that can be used against you, because it gets back to what Nick was saying a second ago. Look, the Democrats are in. They've got to throw everybody off Twitter and Facebook. Why? Russia. You're a Russian bot. Everything's about Russia. That's why we're doing all of our sanctioning to stop us from the evil Russia. That was their grift. It was all Russia was the tool that they used for all of their throwing everybody off social media, etc. Right? Just a new one. No, oh, that's terrible. The Trump people, that's horrible. How can you throw people off social media for Russia? Now, Israel, that's what we need to. So all they're going to do is exchange Russia for Israel as the reason they use to go after everybody. And here's what they know. The Democrats will be 100% on board with that. So now, at least when it was to Russia, there was a few Republicans here and there that would push back. But when it comes to Israel, united across the entire government, they'll say, well, you're supporting terrorism in, whoever, the Hamas or whatever, right? And they'll use that to go after you. Might I add something else in with this? This whole business about headscarves in Iran, right? Oh, they're forcing people to wear head coverings, unlike Saudi Arabia. They literally cut your head off. You don't need a head. You don't have a head anymore. So how can you need a head covering? But the point is this new government, so-called government, the ISIS people in Syria, one of their first requirements is women have to wear head coverings. For some reason, that anger over the rights of women to be forced to wear head coverings doesn't apply to a government that we just installed in Syria. It only applies to Iran.
I have a hotspot video I'm coming out on this regarding how the new Syrian government, I call them woke Al Qaeda, they're begging the United States.
De-ISIS.
What you call them?
De-ISIS.
Like that. De-ISIS. That's good. They're begging the United States to convince Israel to have a friendly relationship with them.
Wow.
So you have Israel who's literally demilitarizing the country and seizing the lands, and the response of woke Al Qaeda, ISIS, I'm still in that. They're responding to ask the United States to have Israel become their friend. It's a complete cuckery. And regarding your comment, maybe last thing I'll say, what Garland said, I'm glad a lot of people picking up on this terrorist thing. It's been something that many people have been behind a very long time. Like, they will just call you a terrorist supporter if you support Hamas, which shows that there's no actually arbitrary metrics that they use to define a terrorist. I always say, how will you guys define a terror? How will you define terrorism? Is it when you break the law? Because if you define terrorism based on who break the law, that means Israel is the greatest terrorist state that ever existed. In fact, if you base your definition on terrorism based on the law, Joe Biden's a terrorist because he violated Lay's law. So are you using laws, or are you using your feelings? Because if you're using law, which is what I use, and I probably shouldn't do it because the laws are written by Western white societies. But using the law established on the books that white people wrote, not my radical ass, not my ghetto ass. You guys wrote the laws. And the laws that you guys wrote, if someone is illegally occupying your lands, you have the right to armed resistance. So according to the law, Hamas did nothing wrong. People say Hamas are terrorists because they were successful at resistance. They said, well, do you know what happened at 9/11? Yes, it's a successful military operation. You have the right to armed resistance, not fail with armed resistance. So based on not only morality, intellectually, but legally, calling Hamas terrorists is inaccurate. But they call them terrorists anyway because they want to silence people who are calling out the West, because the West are the people who are in rebellion against international law. Because throughout this entire process, Hamas has always asked international courts to try them and hold their people responsible as Israel and the West rebel against them. So who's really the terrorist, my friends?
Yeah.
Sorry for that, Rand. Go ahead, Sarah.
Real quick, that whole terrorism thing, in my point, is going to be not the terrorism to go after them. It's going to be used to this part, supporting terrorism. They'll come up with new laws about supporting terrorism. If you support terrorism, you can't do this, you can't do that. We can throw you in jail. You lose all your rights and you can become a terrorist supporter, and now you don't have your constitutional rights. It will be all about that. That will just be a ruse. So they can say, and that way, Venezuela, they'll say, you know what, Maduro's a terrorist. And if you say, well, I don't think we should overthrow the government. You're supporting terrorism. You're thrown off YouTube. You can be arrested. It's going to be just now. The game is going to be every one of the targets of the U.S. empire will be labeled a terrorist, and none of us will be able to push back in any way against any of their imperial machinations around the world. And if we do, we'll be labeled a supporter of terrorists and lose all of our at that point. That's when you start to lose your constitutional rights, and they get around the Constitution. And like Nick was saying, that's pure fascism. That's the game. How do you get the fascism? You're supporting terrorists, you lose your rights. Boom, there we're there.
Yep.
Yeah, that's a great point, Garland. It shows the confluence too of the war on terror now merged with great power conflict, right? Where after the Patriot Act, 9/11, terrorism became this magic word that you could use to circumvent all of the civil rights and things that we expect.
Patriot Act, yeah,
right.
And watch for 2025 when the war on drugs and the war on terror merge for the war on Mexico. Watch this, because those cartels will be labeled terrorist organizations and they're bringing drugs into the country. I do want to read some of our super chats for both of you guys and your channels as well, just before we wrap up. Five Revolutionary Blackout memberships. Thank you, Geo. Summer says, Happy New Year, Garland. I guess the rest of us are just second fiddle. Thank you. Cletus, love you. Thank you so much. Don't forget, Morning Joe did a 180 from Biden's Never Been Better to He Needs to Go in just 1 week. We don't watch Morning Joe. I don't know what they're doing over there. We talked about John. Thank you again. Jank, I had to put up something about the Young Turks. Imagine being an Armenian woman on a show called The Young Turks. Yeah, really. Great discussion. Someone called us the 4 horse peoples of the intellectual apocalypse, which I'm going to hold on to that. I'm going to hold on to that. And I loved this, and somebody actually appreciated it. I didn't name his name, but I guess we will now. Great rebuttal to Stu Peters in Spaces. I'll say his name. We have an online presence now making the JQ the entirety of their establishment critique, using their platform to further segment and ignore the working class along radical lines, swearing, yes, that's the point. Everybody's lost their class consciousness, and they're just looking at the person who's different from them on the left and the right. And that's what they're keeping us all fighting, while they're just getting rich off of Elon's enormous crypto scam that is Twitter. So we didn't even get to get into all of the stuff, but yeah.
Yeah, and to say one more word about fascism here, because so many Americans are confused into thinking that fascism means either you're anti-Semitic, right? That you have this anti-Jewish racism, or that you like support authoritarian strongmen. And these, like in the minds of a lot of people, this is what fascism is. The real fascism has a class base. Yes. It means the corporate monopolies and financial monopolies owning and controlling the government and using the arm wing of the state to crush the working class and crush any popular democracy. So that's what it is. And that's exactly what we're seeing via the use of this anti-Semitic propaganda, anti-communist propaganda, and the whole lot of it.
Very well said.
Yeah.
Closing thoughts, either of you guys, please leave us with some wisdom. I have so many good clips of Nick from this show. Just put on his rant.
Well, my closing thoughts is that people should do everything they can to get involved. That the reason that there are changes now going on is because people, and not just us, the people that are doing stuff, but the people in the chat, they're on X and they're tweeting stuff towards various members of Congress, and they're like, if you like this show, go online and tweet it or whatever you call it now towards various people, share it on your social media platforms. A big part of what's happening in the alternative media is the sharing of shows on social media platforms. That's how I find a lot of stuff. I just, whatever, Facebook or hey, look at this. So everybody in the chat, understand that you are the most important part of the new media, and share this show and other shows. That's what I think is making the biggest change. We're just, if a few people watched it, that's one thing, but when they start sharing on social media, that brings in the big numbers.
We got over 6,000. We got over 6,000.
Wow. Nice.
Great New Year's Eve show.
For 2025, promise me that you will never, ever donate to a politician or charity.
We can't afford it anymore. In 2025, we can't afford it.
We need to build, and this is my big goal, because I was talking to Savvy and a lot of people at RBN family, And my big focus is rebuilding the RBN mutual aid infrastructure. In this era where liberals are living through a defeatist, like I've never seen liberals this down bad in my entire life. There's obviously party operatives, but there are people who well-meaning. They just fell for Democratic propaganda. This is our time to show up for them. This is our time to organize for the people who are well-meaning, because Donald Trump will betray his base. It's the most guaranteed thing you can possibly think of in this universe. Is Donald Trump will betray them. So what happens when MAGA, where a few good faith people in MAGA realize that? We got to be here to organize among our class lines and make life for ourselves better, because I seen that this last year was depressing. And then I ended on here because I seen the axis of resistance be completely destroyed. Well, they was crumbled. And that's just factually speaking. If someone supported the axis of resistance. So our goal is to oppose the fascist scores known as Zionism at home. We got to be the enemy from within that they talk about. Because there's not going to be no axis of resistance. There's not going to be some magical outsiders to help us to throw this empire. We got to put it upon ourselves. So more than content, more than anything else, I want to organize. I want to have a real anti-establishment resistance, which I'm glad that, once again, John, ACP, they're doing a good job at that. DDGeopolitics is doing a good job educating people, Garland, Nixon. This is the community that we need to build. We need to completely reject the two-party duopoly culture war nonsense and start organizing against our criminal ruling class.
Period.
Okay. I got to make one quick statement.
Go ahead.
I'll go back to this. I had a caller, a radio show in D.C., and they said, "Well, you're always criticizing the Democratic Party, and you should think of a way to save them and to fix them." And I said, "You don't understand, pal. I'm not the cure. I'm the disease. I'm not trying to save them and fix them." And what we have to do, because there's a propensity, there's an inclination amongst people, inclination to try to save some kind of a dying system. And I'm like, the system's oppressing you. It's killing you. It's impoverishing you. Don't try to save it. It ain't gonna. You're just going to get started back where you were before and get the same thing over again. You need fundamental, foundational, revolutionary, whatever word you want to use. We need significant systemic change. So stop. Don't be misled and inclined into, we got to tweak the system and change the management, and everything will just work out fine if we can just fix this little part of the system. Be a part of foundational, fundamental change, and we have to demand it, and not just demand it because the ruling elite's not going to give it to you. You got to create it. We got to get together and we got to create and support the system that we want, but don't try to tweak and save a system that's grinding you into the ground.
That's the note we need to end on. We need to do this more often. This was really good.
We ought to do it weekly. This is great. This is
let's do it weekly. Oh, we got another weekly show. We have 2 other weekly shows coming out. Oh, this is we will talk.
And you know what we all need to work on? Finding other channels and friends so we can run it weekly, and we can get this on like 20, 25 channels. Like a truly, like I keep using this term now, alternative news network. We need to build that, where what happens if we do this weekly and we got this on 25 channels and we got 20, 30, 50,000 viewers, other people are going to start doing it. And so that's something we can build on, I think. So I'm all for that. I'm available to you guys.
Going to get us all arrested.
Well, that's coming anyway. You might as well do it right. You might as well enjoy it.
Go down swinging.
Vanguard of getting arrested in prison for fascism. So thank you both for helping us end the year on a very high note. But I want to know what you both have in store coming up.
I definitely look forward to that. Revolutionary Blackout Network is still down. That's the whole idea of RBN was I seen the independent media apparatus filled with shit lips. So we had this idea of creating this radical media organization, and as we built RBN because we was like, man, no one is doing this shit. But as we was building RBN, you guys built DDGeopolitics. Garland, Nixon was doing the same. So we all had the same idea at the same time. So it's great that we're able to link up. Roundtable Thursday, that's essentially what we plan on doing here too. We always bring different voices on, and we're gonna have amazing guests line up on our roundtables. Me, JB, Sabby. We have. I'm trying to remember the guest we have for this week. Dr. CBS. She's a banger. She's a great guest, intellectual. She will be joining us for the roundtable on Thursday. Post Duopoly show is Friday. So once again, this is what I want to do, RBN, bring different channels together. Post Duopoly is the show I have with Due Distance, Harlan Media. We come together, do a roundtable podcast. We do that about once a month. So I was off YouTube. I took a break from streaming for about 3 weeks. So we will be back. I will be back starting technically today with this stream and with the roundtable on Thursday and Post Duopoly show on Friday. So people hit me up like, Nick, where you going? I got to take a few days off, man. This shit,
Yeah, you needed
news killing me. It's been nonstop for 4 years, so I had to take a break. I'll be back. This is my returning stream, technically. But Thursday and Friday, we got great shows coming on RBN. Make sure you guys subscribe to Revolutionary Blackout Network. We need all the help because I don't know if you guys saw that. They took 3,000 of our subscribers during my break. They just shaved 3,000 of them off. Every time we gain 1,000 subscribers, they take 2,000 off. So we are getting fucked in the algorithm. So if you guys want to help us out, it'd be deeply appreciated. So
yeah,
I appreciate it.
We'll get it on the Telegram as well. And Garland, and you.
Let's see. In about 10 minutes, I got late.
No, you got to go. We're all getting notifications for your
Yeah, I got late.
Thanks for inviting me, guys. It was fun.
In 10 minutes, that's going to be fun. But for this year, my goal, I think one of my big goals is to work on what we're doing now, to bring a bunch of channels together so we can all send out the link and to try to get as many channels as possible, get some good shows together and start getting this huge network of people where we can maybe even have like an email chain where people can send a link. Hey guys, I got this person, that person, and this person or whatever at this time. Here's a link to that. Anybody who wants to run that, because somebody may look at it and say, well, that's not my thing. I don't want to run that.
Yeah.
And then now we're starting to get a bunch of people together where you're sending out links and we're all getting various content to run and stuff we can choose from. And before you know it, you're running like 24 hours a day darn near because everybody's putting something in and these channels are just blowing up. And we almost have like a news network where somebody can go on and they're like, well, crap, man, it's 7 o'clock Nick's on, 8 o'clock Garland's on, DD5, this person's on at 9, and they got stuff constantly to choose from. I think that's the direction things are going, and that's what I'm pushing for in the new year.
We'll get together. We need to talk a little bit more because I have some stuff that we can't talk about it on air, but we'll talk about it back channel. But thank you both. I don't know when we'll be back. Ritter said he might come on. I've got a treat for you guys. Ritter agreed to do the 2025 Ritter's prediction show. So this is going to be
Friday?
Nick and Garland, thank you both. And happy New Year. And I'll let you both go because I know you both are busy. John and I, we are excited to announce let's get Garland. Garland, please, thank you. Go to your next show. John and I are excited to announce our new show, which area apparently deleted from the assets. But Chris Halali has a new show coming out, and John has a new show. And maybe we will talk to Garland and Nick about another weekly roundtable, building a coalition. I'm really excited for 2025. And you, John?
I'm excited for coalition building. I mean, there's so much energy among people that we used to be kind of disconnected from each other. And now it seems like there's a recognition, like a growing recognition that there's no reason for us not to work with one another, whether it's
none of us argue. That's the thing. Like, we don't really engage in that sort of like that influencer drama, like that the other side kind of does. So I think like we're like, what have we all been doing? We've all kind of just not been paying attention to each other and kind of like doing our own thing. And I think it's time, especially after the inauguration, leading up to it. I know Garland's doing something that day in Washington DC, but leading up to it and after the inauguration, it's time for, and I love this idea that Garland has about all the channels just broadcasting stuff all the time, 24 hours a day. That's what it should be. We should be battling their shitty 24-hour news channels with our multipolar 24-hour news channel. So
exactly. I mean, the other thing I'm looking forward to is more international work, more travels, hopefully for DDGeopolitics, and then for myself.
Stop being poor.
Hopefully we'll stop being poor this year. There's some promising things in the works though. But yeah, we'll talk about that through back channels too. But we're not going to stop one way or another.
We're not going to stop. We'll be doing it. We'll be broadcasting from our vans in the parking lots of Walmarts before we stop. But thank you guys, and really happy New Year. We'll be on the interwebs until we pass out before midnight. Anybody know what's going on with Jackson Hinkle? Nothing. He was just baptized in the ice water in Moscow. He's doing great. He's invigorated. Girlfriend, having a great time.
He's doing great. He's still kicking.
Still kicking. He's still alive. He's alive and well. Well, thank you both, or thank you, and thank you all for watching. And we will see you probably Friday with Scott Ritter. And Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, everybody.